What is going on? It is Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we have a very special Mock the Mock. Per request of Marcus Whitman himself, I am going to be reviewing that franchise guy's first ever mock draft for 2024. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Y'all know how to use YouTube. Below my face is my board. Below that are all the great ways to get involved with our community, as well as take advantage of our two sponsors, Oldie as well as UnderDog Fantasy. I am making this the night before I drive 10 hours to Mobile, Alabama. That's how much I love you, Marcus. But let's get right into this. Let's have a good time. I don't usually do this YouTube style format because, one, I do have personal relationships with a lot of these people. So I don't always like mixing professional and personal. It's just not always the best thing, especially when I disagree. But that's usually what happens when I bring people on the show and you get to see that difference of opinion. Mock the mocks are a little bit more for the professional side of things. But of course, that franchise guy did bring it up on Twitter, so I have to be able to respond. So, of course, we're going to be doing it. So, a little bit different style of format. Obviously, it's a YouTube video. It is what it is. Let's have some fun, though. It's still going to be a great time because I actually haven't seen the entire mock draft. I went through it once, and that was like back on the day that it came out. So, we'll actually give it a like on my actual YouTube account. I have two YouTube accounts. Don't worry about it. But let's get right into this. Starting out with the number 1 overall pick, the Bears go Caleb Williams. So Justin Fields ends up getting dealt to Atlanta for a 2nd round and a 4th round pick. I'm actually going to be coming out in February with ultimate draft guides for every single team. I'm going to break down key free agents and then actually look at maybe who they should re-sign and then do a mock draft based off of that, which then you get to see the overall results. I think it's a great way to be able to break down also each round by the specific needs and specific players that I think you guys should be looking at and targeting in each round. So very excited for that. But yes, Caleb Williams at number 1 should be the right move, especially if you end up reacquiring a 2nd round pick. Obviously, yours went for an edge rusher and Montez Sweat. Great trade, in my opinion. And now you get that 2nd round pick in return and get your new signal caller. He is phenomenal. Shout out to Marcus for having the stones to actually put legitimate tape. So you guys can go watch that and get a nice breakdown. But Caleb Williams, similar in terms of his overall assets, like mobility, playmaking, just not as big or as strong as Justin Fields, but also it's very fiscally responsible to go after a player with that much talent and is going to be that much cheaper in the short run and in the long because Justin's going to get expensive very, very soon. So let's find this number 2 overall pick here. I should have just done this. We should just drag it over to here to be able to talk about our number 2 pick and Drake Maye out of North Carolina. Again, feel free to go check out the actual video for you to be able to watch all 22 clips that he has there. Again, very ballsy. You have to get very explicit permission, and YouTube is not a huge fan of when I decided to put up tape because that is a-okay, but it happened on early in the show, and I never wanted to do it again. But Drake Maye is the number 2 pick for the Washington Commanders. I'm not a huge fan of Drake Maye. I'll come out and say it. I think he's still a starting caliber quarterback. That's why he's in my green zone. Top 32 players are in my green zone. I think he could be a starting caliber quarterback, absolutely. But Drake Maye is not exactly there for me in terms of the consistency of play. And I really wanted him to take a bigger step this year than he did. It was the 2nd year starting. First year, I give some kudos there. He was very solid and, inconsistencies happen. But 2nd year starting, I didn't see very much progression at all. And that is a bit scary to me. So that's why he is tied my quarterback 3. Of course, every single quarterback in this class has their own unique strengths and weaknesses. And technically, it's a lame way of, approaching it. And like every single player has their own unique strengths and weaknesses, but like most of the quarterback archetypes are completely different. Caleb Williams plays a different game than Jayden Daniels does, who plays a different game than Drake Maye, who plays a different game than Bo Nix, etc. But at pick number 3, Marvin Harrison goes to the New England Patriots over Jayden Daniels. I actually tested out this theory as well. I think it's a brilliant idea to go after a wide receiver because your whole entire organization is really crap at drafting wide receivers. Hate to say it. So just go after the guaranteed success. Quarterback is a position y'all have actually drafted relatively solidly over the past few years, in past few decades, might I say. Even getting Jimmy G, Bailey Zappi, Mac Jones. Like, you can call Mac Jones a bust because first round quarterback didn't really turn out to be a franchise guy. But you still end up getting, someone who did start multiple years, ended up doing a pretty good job on certain times. And, he is a fringe starter quality, and maybe he could have a Baker Mayfield resurgence. Who knows? But, Bailey Zappi, you guys know how to target quarterbacks down the line. I can fully support this because, again, you're essentially allowing your strength to remain your strength, and then you're covering up your weakness, which is drafting wide receivers, by drafting Marvin Harrison right there. But at pick number 4, this is where things change. Jesus, sorry, Marcus. Hate to pause on a freeze frame like that. But at pick number 4, the Arizona Cardinals select Malik Neighbors out of LSU. I know Marcus actually was talking about how Malik might be one of the highest graded wide receivers that he has graded. I love Malik in terms of the game breaking ability. He is right below blue chip for me, which is phenomenal. Not many receivers have ever made it into blue chip territory. So for him to be right there, and 99% sure he is my wide receiver too. So yeah, he's my wide receiver too. And he is a solidified wide receiver too. He really can he can really play a role that is game changing. And maybe you can call that blue chip, but I go off of my grades, and my grades are that he's really close to blue chip, but not there yet. But regardless, Malik Neighbors is a phenomenal prospect, game-breaking speed, developed as a route runner. I still want to see him get a little bit better, a little bit more nuanced. Those out routes, the 90-degree cuts, I really do wish he could turn a little bit quicker and round it less. Because the more you round one of those routes, yeah, you can maintain speed pretty well, but the separation is not always there with corners who are very fluid at changing directions. I appreciate the suddenness of a player like Tank Dell, where you get to really watch him sit into his hips, like Amari Cooper at the Combine was very famous for this. The way he sat so close to the ground and was able to change directions, that center of gravity really does mean a ton to me. Malik Neighbors is getting there. I just don't think he is there just yet. So, I mean, it's still a very solid option nonetheless. Here's a quick little recap for those of y'all who wanted to take a peek at it. Honestly, I should just go off of this, but it kind of is a little bit more fun because I really do like the surprise aspect of, going right here and then talking about how Joe Alt is the number 5 pick to the Chargers. Also, Marcus went through and made all of these graphics. Kind of like to give him some respect because making graphics, even though they look simple, are just a tedious, big pain in the ass. Got to call it out as it is. It's the least enjoyable part of the job is making a ton of graphics for things like this. Hence why I also really love doing live mock drafts because, I do this for the way too early mock drafts, and even that gets to be a lot. And I can just imagine the amount of work that Marcus has to put in for, to be fair, this is a base template, but it's a base template that he spent a lot of time doing. There's a lot that y'all don't get to see behind the scenes. So want to show some appreciation for Marcus's time here. Regardless, at pick number 5, Joe Alt goes to the Los Angeles Chargers. Big fan of Joe Alt, obviously going to be the right tackle there. Left tackle is kind of secured with Rashawn Slater. But Joe Alt, he is a phenomenal prospect. You can never go wrong by protecting your quarterback. That's just something that is perfectly fine in my eyes. I think that you go after more of a generational level prospect in Brock Bowers, who I do know goes significantly later in this. So there's that as well. Positional value-wise, a tackle is more valuable than a tight end. I understand that. And the wide receivers are off the board here. I think, once Kellen Moore was there, he's not there anymore. It was almost a perfect fit for Brock Bowers to be there because Kellen Moore loves his tight ends. Harbaugh loves his tight ends. It all works out. But I think there is a little bit of room for Joe Alt in this equation. I love being able to boost the offensive line. Never going to complain about it. I'd probably just give it an A, hoping that Brock Bowers was the selection. But again, who am I to really complain? This is the pick that got me to really want to do this. I'm going to kill you, Marcus, even though I love Jayden Daniels. He's my QB2. They go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, personally, if I were Pittsburgh, we have a team that is relatively win now. And I understand that the Bears most likely would want to acquire an earlier second round pick than what the Steelers have to offer. But I think it would be more worth it for both the Bears and the Steelers, for the Steelers to send their second and then a future third. Hell, even 2 futures, like a future second, as well as this year's second, would just be more valuable in my eyes for both franchises. You're also sending Justin Fields to the AFC rather than keeping him in the NFC in case he succeeds. But also, I think this is a good route for the Steelers to go and try to acquire a quarterback. We're too far away. It makes sense to go after Jayden Daniels if you don't get your quarterback in Justin Fields. But we still have a tackle position to fill out. We still have a corner 2 position to fill out. We still have a center position to fill out, which, yes, if you know how to draft properly, you can address that down the line. But, this draft doesn't have necessarily a full 300 players that are draftable. So you are going to be reaching earlier and more often than maybe you'd like to. Of course, we'll see as the Senior Bowl progresses and everything else. We'll see what happens. But Jayden Daniels, quarterback out of LSU, the Steelers could definitely use the boost, but that is just really pricey to pay. Really pricey to pay. Of course, the Giants are essentially doing what they did with the Bears back in the day for Justin Fields and acquiring a good amount of draft capital because maybe they just aren't ready yet. But here at pick number 7, making sure that we do not skip over said pick 7, it would make things so much easier if I just did what I said I was originally going to do and just go off of those screens. But again, got to show some respect for the graphics. Pick 7, Olu Fashanu goes to the Titans. Left tackle is the position to go. If it's not Joe Alt, it's going to be Olu Fashanu. So no need to really waste too much time on that. Dallas Turner, this is pretty much everybody's pick for the Falcons at pick 8. Almost to the point where I don't think it's going to happen. Like, that when everybody shoes in a pick and you're just like, like it's like set in stone. There's always some reason why it's just not set in stone. But if they end up acquiring Justin Fields, it makes total sense for them to go after an edge rusher. Dallas Turner is a phenomenal prospect. He's been my edge one since day one and has remained so. So I can't really see much fault in it at all. So we got pick number 9 that I absolutely whiffed on. We got the Bears going Romodun. A big fan of Romodun being on the Bears because of the fact that he brings a unique frame at 6'3", 210 plus. He is a very fluid route runner as well. I think he still needs to work on the nuances of just the pure route running itself, but he does move differently than most wide receivers. Got to give him credit for that. The Bears are looking for a wide receiver too. If it's not going to be an edge rusher, this is a perfectly fine selection. My only concern is that the edge rushers in round 2 are going to be a little bit lower quality than the wide receivers in round 2. And since you have your wide receiver 1 and you have your edge 1, I just prefer to get the best value on my wide receiver in edge 2, which I'd go edge here. But again, it's not an actual ding. It's still perfectly fine. Of course, then we got Talise Fuaga, my draft darling, starting out into the year. He was my tackle number 2 starting out this draft process. Yes, preseason, I fell in love with this guy. It was really his play versus Tuli Tuipulotu that caught my eye because Tuli won quite a few reps, but Talise played Tuli better than almost every other tackle I saw, if not every other tackle, and he still was so raw as a player. Big fan of Talise. He's going to be there in Mobile, so super excited to see him up close and in person, but phenomenal prospect. The Jets could absolutely use that nice little kick in the ass. So here at pick number 11, okay, we got Jared Verse. Okay, well, I guess we don't have a graphic there. There we go. Okay, Jared Verse. So, Jared Verse for the Vikings. I made that pick myself, losing both Marcus Davenport as well as Danielle Hunter. That's a big oof. Maybe you can get one of them back. I know that it's not going to be Marcus Davenport. I'm hinting at Danielle Hunter, but Jared Verse, still a huge need. The quarterbacks aren't proper value right now. I like Bo Nix, but even my love for Bo Nix is stretched by taking him at pick number 11. So good pick overall. I mean, it just makes total sense. Then we have Bo Nix, speaking of the little guy himself. People call him old. He's younger than Michael Penix, who people randomly love. So, love that. We love how it's not fair right there, but that's okay. Bo Nix had a great career ascension there at Oregon. I don't think anybody could have succeeded at Auburn, to be fair. It was a whole entire screwed up program. And Bo Nix goes to Oregon, where he's finally surrounded with legitimate talent and legitimate coaching. And randomly he does better. Crazy. I love his mobility. I think he is a very solid quarterback. I know Marcus is a fan of him as well. I was saying 11's a little bit of a stretch for me. And, it's still, you do have significant drops in value every single pick you progress. So this is where it's like, I still don't like the value, but it's like, this team doesn't have a second round pick. They should trade back and try to get him, but you don't know who else is going to try to snag a quarterback at this point. It's a very top heavy quarterback class. If you want to go early and often, it's understandable. Like, I have Bo Nix at 23 on my board, and y'all know my philosophy at this point. I've explained it a couple times. You take the spot there on my board divided by 2. That's where I really start being acceptable of the pick. And 11.5 is less than 12. So it makes sense. That's a very long-winded way of saying, he's a good quarterback. I think he's a very talented guy. Just it's a little bit early in my opinion. But again, the Broncos are going to be looking for a quarterback. It's a good player to go after because he is consistent. He is, maybe not the most risk accepting. He's a little bit more risk averse, but when he does accept the risk, he does do a very good job. So yeah, Bo Nix is actually above on my board than Drake Maye. He's tied with Drake Maye. They're 23 and 24. Regardless, I picked 24. Just kidding. I just literally looked right here. Pick 13 with the Raiders, Troy Fautanu. This team is in need of offensive line assistance. I'd prefer to go after a right tackle here in Amari Mims, or you can go after JC Latham. I think the value of an offensive tackle is just significantly more. And technically, Troy Fautanu is a left tackle with 34-inch arms, but his play just seems to gear best for the inside. He's a little bit more, how do I say this? He's a little bit more rabid, almost. Like there's a little bit less control, a little bit more insanity and power to his game, and just a lot less control and finesse. And that, to me, is best served on the interior of the offensive line rather than the exterior. We'll, again, see him very soon in Mobile, but, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. I think the Raiders would love the mentality of Troy Fautanu. I would just prefer to get the better value at a different position because there are really good guards in the later rounds. Pick number 14, Jon Newton goes to the New Orleans Saints. Jerzon's not my interior defensive lineman 1. He is literally interior defensive lineman 2, and he's right next to interior defensive lineman 1. So you can call him tied 1. But Jon Newton's a phenomenal prospect. I've actually taken interior defensive line multiple times for the Saints because I think they really do need it. But with Trevor Penning kind of being butt cheeks, you just need to continue swinging on the position. I would prefer to go after a right tackle who should be transferring to left in Amari Mims or JC Latham. But y'all know I love Amari Mims with all of my heart. With the next selection, the Colts select Nate Wiggins at 15. The pick that I've made quite a few times now. I think defensive back's a very smart move for Indy. It's a position that is always in need for almost every team. And Nate Wiggins is a super smart corner. My one issue, I have 2 issues with him. One, he doesn't like coming into the box to make a play. Not a huge fan of that in terms of the run support. But the one that I have a bigger gripe over, because, 185 pounds, you're not necessarily going to want to go toe-to-toe with a Braylon Allen every single time. I get it. But one of my big issues with Nate is that he takes off quite a few reps or parts of reps. He'll have a phenomenal part of the play where, the receiver, like he makes his cut and it's almost like Nate Wiggins knew it was coming. He just sits there. Like he is very, very smart. But it's almost like he takes a moment to bask in the glory of doing a really good job. And then he just takes a moment off and the wide receiver gets open. And it's just like, if you stayed alert and in the game, you would have been unbelievably locked down. You'd probably be a top 10, if not top 5 player on my board. But I don't know how much of that you can coach out. And that's what's exciting to see. We're still relatively new into this scouting game. Hell, the first draft that I ever legitimately in-depth scouted, they're just coming up towards their 5th-year contracts. The show's not even 4 years old yet. So, that should just show y'all that we can, have a little bit of patience here. But at pick 16, you got Brock Bowers. It is a position of need, actually, for Seattle to go after a tight end. Just the value of tight end is absolute butt cheeks if you don't get Brock Bowers. So Brock Bowers is a phenomenal prospect. I have him at number 2 overall on my board. He is just such a fun player to watch, and he really is underrated as a blocker. One of the best blocking tight ends I've seen. A little bit overrated as a route runner. I think that, he's a solid route runner, and I think he's a solid after the catch player, like very, very solid, like very good. Not trying to put him in the average tier by any stretch. He's like a great route runner and a great after the catch guy. I'm just saying he is generational as an overall prospect. Maybe not in one category except blocking, which is the one category he doesn't really get very much credit for, but still a phenomenal player, someone who I have a lot of respect for. At pick 17, we got Brian Thomas going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think Brian Thomas, it depends. This pick very much depends on whether they keep Calvin Ridley. And, you could say, since, you're going to be getting a player like Brian Thomas, who I think is an elite wide receiver too. I don't think he's going to actually pan out to be a pure wide receiver one. I don't think his route running is up to par compared to some of the other wide receivers in the class that are a little bit more route running savvy. He is a year behind in terms of his route running progression. And I want to see another year. And this is a guy who I have in my 80s on my board because that's where I put players that I see a lot of raw talent and need an extra year before there actually impacts on rosters. So Brian Thomas is a year away from being actually worth a 17th overall pick, in my opinion. But if you have him as a wide receiver too, and not having to carry the weight of being the number one wide receiver on the team, it makes sense. It makes sense. So you'd have to re-sign Calvin Ridley here. That would be the one reason why I would be accepting of this pick. I think defensive back's a strong position to go. There's a really strong top of the class at corner, and unfortunately, it does feel like the middle of the class was extremely overvalued including by myself. I'll take ownership of that. There's two players, TJ Tampa, as well as Josh Newton. Both of them I really have been trying to love, and I've been showing them a lot of love in the past, but when I continue reevaluating them, the love just wasn't there. So unfortunately, two of the main guys I love to take on day 2 are guys who I have relegated to day 3. But Brian Thomas, still a phenomenal player. I just hope that, it all works out that way. As a Steelers fan, I absolutely hate this. Amari Mims then goes to the Cincinnati Bengals. So I love the storyline of Broderick Jones and Amari Mims. I've been clamoring for Amari Mims probably since pick 10, damn near. So I obviously love him to death. This is a great pick for Cincy. Right tackle is a huge need, and Amari Mims is great value. No need to overcomplicate it. At pick 19, we go with my number 1 corner in the draft, Teran Arnold out of Alabama. He reminds me of a miniature Joey Porter Jr., not afraid to get in the box. I love his tenacity. He's a great player, very, very smart. Still working a little bit on the intricacies of the game, but you got to give a guy credit where you got to give it. Like, the instincts are something that you don't develop very, very easily unless you're Kamari Lassiter, which is weird, but, sometimes there's an exception, not a rule. Teran Arnold would be a great addition for the Rams. I think that his physicality would be contagious, and that's something that I could see the Rams really valuing. This was part of the Pittsburgh trade, but the New York Giants are back at pick 20 and drafted J.C. Latham. I would love to see maybe, rather than Pittsburgh sending all these picks just for 106, maybe they sent Evan Neal as well, just so that, my Steelers could get a tackle, and I also make Evan Neal. Send Evan Neal to my Steelers whenever I want to go after a tackle for New York. Bottom line, if you are done with the Evan Neal project, this is not a bad position to go. It is a little PTSD of going a Bama tackle to replace a Bama tackle, but at least this one is a native right tackle. So, Evan Neal belongs as a left tackle. I pray that he gets an opportunity somewhere else where he can really regain the confidence in himself to play the position he is best at. But J.C. Latham in that situation is perfectly fine. We have Green Bay moving up to select Cooper DeJean with Miami, sending their 3rd round pick and 6th, as well as their 1st round pick, obviously, for Miami's 121, as well as their 5th round pick. So they technically move up a little bit, and then they send their 3rd round pick. Cooper DeJean, Green Bay, that's a match made in heaven. I actually had Green Bay move up with Pittsburgh to select Cooper DeJean. So y'all know that I really love that. Don't really need to waste your time because if y'all have actually watched my videos, I'm probably going into depth why I love Cooper DeJean to this team so much. Just the versatility is undeniable, and it kicks Keyshawn Nixon to the curb. There you go. This is a pick that I made in my most recent mock draft. Kool-Aid McKinstry going to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that it's a phenomenal move. I reevaluated him, and I had some sneaky suspicions I wouldn't like him nearly as much as I did because he was a top 10 player on my board. He was actually at number 11 by the end of it, but he was somebody who I had in blue chip tier. And when I watched him, there were reps where I was like, damn, it felt very similar to Nate Wiggins, except rather than part of the rep, it was the whole rep that he almost took off. And then the next play, this dude is he has a fire lit under his ass. I'm like, whoa, this guy might be the best corner in the class. And I think that potential motor concern might scare teams earlier on because he has a great frame. He's been a corner 1 for a good period of time. And, he has been able to legitimately scare the crap out of quarterbacks. I mean, his target rate went from, I think, 80 targets last year down to 40. He ended up proving to defensive coordinators that this dude is somebody to fear. And Kool-Aid McKinstry is a great corner. When he gets that fire lit under his rear, he really can be one of the best. He's great in off-man coverage as well. I think that, Vic Fangio, I don't know how long he'll actually be there, but this is a longer-term investment. I think this is a very solid idea. My only issue is that they have James Bradbury, which maybe they'll get rid of him. Pray to God that maybe you can just eat some cap. But Darius Slay, Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks, and Isaiah Rodgers, that's tough to fit another corner in there. Even though they need to, it's very tough to. And I mean, I just wish Teran were here because I want a cornerback that is both flexible in the slot as well as on the boundary, because you just can't really fit many of those other dudes successfully into the slot. That's my only big gripe there, but I literally made the pick myself. Who the hell am I to disagree? At pick number 23, we got Quin Mitchell, cornerback out of Toledo. There's just not very much all 22 tape out there on him. Just got to call it out as it is. It is what it is. The main two sources that I use only have his tape from 2022. I've seen normal game tape, but I never, ever, ever form my opinion on defensive backs from game tape. Only all 22. And, that might make me late to the Quin Mitchell train, but I think that's perfectly fine. I'd rather be here late than never, or here late, honestly, than early because I'm pretending to know what I know. So I know Marcus actually has more sources than I do for all 22. I'm praying one day that maybe the boy could hook me up. Maybe we can get a couple beers and maybe I can get some secret information. Marcus, I'll see you in like a couple of days in Mobile, so that's going to be kind of fun. But Quin Mitchell, I mean, the statistics are phenomenal. He is built to be a boundary corner at 6 foot, about 196, 200 pounds. Like, that is exactly what you're looking for. And I think I'm going to be pretty much wowed by him in Mobile. I'm very excited. And for those of y'all who will be watching the one-on-one reps, just remember that those drills, the one-on-ones with receivers and DBs, they're designed for receivers to win. So just watch how corners lose, or if corners dominate, that might be another thing. But if corners lose, just watch how they lose. If they lose respectably, that's somebody you should take note of. Sometimes it's not just the receiver that's doing a good job. It's sometimes the corner as well. But also watch out. If there's some dominant reps, there's some bad receivers out there. Just keep in mind that it's not everything is who wins and who loses. You got to watch the matchups there. So very excited to see Quin, though, regardless. At pick number 24, we have the Cowboys going Keon Coleman. That's a pretty ballsy pick. For someone like me who really values the offensive line, I prefer to target somebody to be a developmental left tackle or a center prospect at this point, because I think Dallas has had an identity of having a great offensive line in all of the eras where they were actually successful. So I think that is going to be a prime candidate to go and continue. And they do value, Jerry values his trenches. So hopefully that's where they go. Keon Coleman would be an intriguing departure from their stereotypical wide receiver core. You'd be going after someone who is going to go up and get it. Almost reminds me a little bit of Dez in that aspect. So you'd be getting a little bit of that energy back. I wouldn't hate it by any stretch because, this team is very offensive focused. And, that's not a bad thing. But I'd prefer to shore up the offensive lines because there's that Penei Sewell and Jamar Chase meme. And it's very, very true. And Tyron Smith might be retiring soon. And I would prefer to have a contingency plan in place. So pick 24, Keon Coleman. I love the originality. And of course, he has to bring up the Wake Forest game where he absolutely toasts Kalen Carson. But at pick number 25, Graham Barton ends up going to Miami. This was part of their trade back. And I think this is excellent. Graham Barton can play every position in the offensive line. Losing 3 interior offensive linemen in one offseason is an absolute ball kicker. So I absolutely hate that for Miami. But hey, great news. This is a great interior offensive line class. So they get to get somebody who also can play tackle in case of injury. That's something that's extremely underrated. We see even with the Jaguars, they kicked one of their guards out to left tackle this year during one of the games. And it was like their backup left guard ended up playing left tackle. And it's like, whoa, that's not a place where you want to be unless you have someone like Graham Barton who has experience there. NFL is just a game of attrition, and this is a great way to get through it. At pick number 26, we got Laiatu Latu going to the Buccaneers. Potential injury concerns can push him down here. He's a phenomenal prospect. I have him at number 32 on my board. I think he needs to have extra power in his lower torso. He's not extremely athletic that way, but he's very strong in the upper torso, and I think there's a little bit of room for him to actually slim out a little bit in the lower and get even more bendy, even more flexible. And I think he can become even better than what we see right now in college. There's a clear path of progression for success. At pick 27, we got Byron Murphy the second out of Texas. He is 6'1", 300 pounds as measured or estimated by the Senior Bowl. We'll see tomorrow. He is up to 310 pounds potentially. That's what he's listed at. But Byron Murphy, gives me some weird EBGB vibes of Jalen Carter. Not one-to-one, but he is the best interior defensive lineman by a little bit of a noticeable margin on my board. He is just athletic, young. He's 20 years old, and he's just so dynamic. He's younger than me, which is wild, but he's a very special talent. I think the Cardinals would be blessed to have him on their roster. At pick 28, we got Xavier Legette, wide receiver out of South Carolina. He's actually not 6'3", 227 as everybody thinks. I think he was listed by the Senior Bowl at 6'1" or 6'7" inches and 219 pounds. Still a very respectable build, but completely different style compared to a 6'3", 230 receiver. Xavier Legette, one of my favorite games I ever saw with him was actually against AJ Terrell. That was a phenomenal chess match between those two, because that rep I was talking about where, Xavier Legette's route was pretty much guessed perfectly by Nate Wiggins. He just took part of that rep off, and then Xavier Legette ended up making a play right there. Or it might have been another receiver, but it was in that game. But Xavier Legette's a phenomenal wide receiver. He is a little bit on the older side. I doubt he ends up getting taken day one, but I still love the potential of going after a star number 2 receiver there for Buffalo. Pick number 29, we got A.D. Mitchell here for Texas. Sorry, Marcus. We got A.D. Mitchell here out of Texas going to the Chiefs. I made this pick myself. I think Troy Franklin's a better move for the Chiefs. However, A.D. Mitchell is still a phenomenal receiver. I still would give this pick an A. They need to go after wide receiver, and if you go either of those two, or even like Xavier Legette, who am I to judge? They're both great, great picks. At pick number 30, I know obviously this draft order is a little bit antiquated because the Chiefs are going to be at 31 or 32. But regardless, Kamari Lassiter goes to the Lions here. I know that a lot of people really love going after Kamari to the Lions, and I explained it in a video I did earlier today, but for y'all yesterday from CBS, I just personally don't love Kamari here. I want to get a true boundary corner, and I don't trust him against size. He plays like he's 180, and he's a very smart corner. I think he ends up working very well in the NFL, but he cannot be a corner one. I don't trust him against sizable receivers who know how to use physicality. I love Ennis Rakestraw Jr. here. I know Marcus probably hasn't fully dived into Ennis Rakestraw yet, but I think he's going to love Ennis. Just personally, I think that's going to be one of the names that he really falls in love with. At pick 31, we got the Niners going Tyler Guyton, star right tackle out of Oklahoma. It's going to be a great week to see how he performs versus a lot of really good talent, because he's still very underdeveloped, but he now at least has a full year starting under his belt, but that's the Niners' biggest need. And finally, at pick 32, we got Trey Benson. Now, the Ravens obviously aren't at 32, RIP, but it is what it is. But Trey Benson going to the Ravens. I love Trey Benson. He's a top 40 player on my board. My only gripe is that obviously 1, running back value, but 2, with the potential wide receivers on the board with Troy Franklin, I know that Troy is right now measured as a round 2 guy for Marcus, but technically this is almost round 2. With OBJ going out, I really want to get someone to replace him and replace him properly. And Troy Franklin can do that so damn well. Like, he just fits it like a hand in glove. Or go after offensive line for a developmental tackle here and just get, someone who could be super versatile, and Kingsley Suamataia. I just prefer to build the offensive lines that way. But that's my personal opinion. I'm going to go to sleep. Thank you so much for watching, and see you on the far side.